I was bleeding out at 17 while my MOM said, "Call me if he dies." But my grandpa declared war for me. "Hi, I'm Matteo. I'm 22. And when I was 17, my mother basically told a hospital, "Call me if he dies." I'm busy. I didn't hear those exact words at first. What I heard was metal twisting, my own scream, and the world exploding into asphalt and headlights. It was a Saturday in October. One of those late afternoons where the sky looks like someone took an eraser to the edges of the clouds. I was on my motorcycle, my first and only real baby, riding across town to my grandfather's place. Used Honda, scratched in all the right places. Bought with 6 months of weekend shifts at the supermarket. My mother hated that bike. Every time she saw it, she'd say the same thing. "You're going to kill yourself on that thing, Matteo. And don't expect me to cry at the funeral." She thought it was a joke. Spoiler, it wasn't funny. Traffic was light. I remember singing under my breath inside the helmet, thinking about my grandfather's coffee and the butter cookies he always just happened to have when I visited. I stopped at a light. It turned green. I started forward. The car from the cross street didn't stop. Red light. Full speed. Driver looking at his phone instead of the road. I had maybe half a second to process the fact that something big and white was coming straight for me. Not enough time to swerve. Not enough time to pray. Just enough time for my brain to say, "Oh." Then the world turned into violence. I felt the impact in my bones. The bike went one way. I went another. The asphalt ripped into my arms, my side. There was this horrible crunching sound that I later realized was my own leg. Everything spun sky, road, sky again, and then there was nothing. Black. When I came back, I was inside an ambulance, drowning in pain. Not I stubbed my toe pain. Not even I broke a bone pain. This was a full-body siren. My leg felt like it was on fire and frozen solid at the same time. My chest hurt every time I tried to breathe. My head felt stuffed with wet cotton. Voices swam around me. BP dropping, possible internal bleeding, prep trauma bay. I tried to talk, but only a raw, broken sound came out. A paramedic squeezed my shoulder. "Stay with us, kid." Name? Ma. Matteo. I managed. "How old are you?" SCV. 17. "Okay, Matteo, listen. We're almost there." The hospital doors burst open. Lights. Hands. Cold scissors cutting through my clothes. They were shouting things over me and around me. Open fracture left femur, 3. Maybe 4 broken ribs. Head trauma. Pupils reactive but sluggish. Probable intra-abdominal bleed. "We need him in surgery now." And then the sentence that cut deeper than anything else. "He's under 18. We need consent." They wheeled me into some holding area just off the main trauma room. A nurse leaned over me. She looked like she could have been someone's grandma, lines around her eyes from smiling more than frowning. "Matteo, we need to call your MOM to sign for surgery, okay?" I nodded, or thought I did. Everything was blurring at the edges. She tapped the number into a cordless phone, put it on speaker, and held it near my head. It rang. Once. Twice. "Yes." My mother answered, that familiar impatient tone already there. "Mrs. Vega?" The nurse said, "This is Central Hospital. Your son Matteo has been in a serious motorcycle accident. We need you to come immediately to sign consent for emergency surgery." There was a pause. In that pause, some part of me expected the normal mother reaction. The panicked questions. Though I'm on my way to tears. Instead, my mother sighed loudly. "I'm just about to go out to dinner," she said. "I don't have time for paperwork." The nurse blinked, glanced at me, then at the doctor standing nearby. "Ma'am, your son has multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding. The surgeons need to operate within the hour. Without your signature, if it's that serious." My mother cut in, voice as flat as a dial tone. "Call his grandfather, Ricardo Mendoza. His number's in Matteo's phone. He can sign whatever you need, Mrs. Vega. Let me know if he doesn't survive," my mother added, and then the line went dead. No goodbye. "No, tell him I love him." Just that. "Let me know if he doesn't survive." The room went quiet in a way I'll never forget. Even the machine seemed to hesitate. The nurse looked like someone had slapped her. A different doctor let out a low, disbelieving whistle. Another nurse whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." Under her breath, I lay there, strapped to a gurney, half conscious, hurting everywhere, and felt something worse than the pain flood me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even shock. It was clarity. My mother had always been distant, busy, focused on her own life. After my dad died when I was 8, she remarried a guy named Fernando who treated me like a piece of furniture he hadn't ordered. Slowly, visits to my grandfather shrank. My presence in the house blurred. My place in her priorities slid down the list. But hearing her say those words out loud, in that moment, with my life literally on the line, it was like someone ripped the last bit of denial out of me. She chose dinner over me. I started crying. Not dramatic sobbing, just silent, tears slipping down the sides of my face into my hair. The older nurse leaned over and wiped them away with a thumb. "Hijo," she murmured. "We're going to call your grandfather. You're not alone." "Not while I'm here." They dragged my phone out of the shredded remains of my jeans, pulled the SIM, jammed it into some backup device, scrolled through my contacts. "Ricardo," the nurse said. "Found him." She dialed. "One ring." "Two, Puno?" His voice came through, rough, alert. "Mr. Mendoza? Your grandson Matteo has been in an accident. He needs emergency surgery. We need a legal guardian to sign consent. I'm on my way." He cut in without asking another question. "Start whatever you have to." "I'll sign everything, sir." "We start," he repeated, voice shaking. "I'm 10 minutes away." "Don't let him die." He hung up. The nurse met the surgeon's eyes. They nodded. "Let's move," the doctor said. "We'll get consent when he arrives." They started wheeling me toward a swinging door marked "Operating Room." As it opened, I heard my grandfather's voice again, echoing in my memory from 100 soccer games and scraped knees. I'd hear, "Matteo, I've got you." And as the anesthesia flooded my veins and the lights blurred above me, I held on to one simple, brutal truth. My mother hadn't shown up, my grandfather had. The difference was about to change everything. The surgery lasted 7 hours. I don't remember the pain of it, obviously, but I remember the aftermath, the kind of exhaustion that feels like gravity is pulling only on you, harder than on the rest of the world. I woke up in a dim hospital room with a tube in my arm, a cast on my leg, bandages on my ribs, and a skull that felt too small for my brain. But the first thing I saw wasn't the ceiling. It was him, my grandfather. Ricardo, 75 years old, retired carpenter, bad knees, kind eyes, slumped in a cheap plastic hospital chair with his hand around mine, not touching it, wrapped around it, as if letting go even in his sleep would somehow put me at risk. His glasses were at the tip of his nose, his chin resting on his chest. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. And when I moved slightly, just enough to make the chair creak, his eyes opened instantly. "Matteo," he breathed, standing up so fast he winced. His hand cupped my face gently. "Mia Nio, you're awake." His eyes were red, not a little red, flaming red. He'd been crying hard. "Grandpa." My voice came out like gravel soaked in water. "You stayed?" He laughed. That shaky laugh people make when they're trying not to break entirely. "Of course I stayed," he said. "They told me to go home. I told them they could call the police if they wanted." He pulled the plastic chair closer and sat down again, leaning forward so our foreheads almost touched. "You scared me," he whispered. "You scared me more than anything in my life." I didn't know what to say, so I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out anyway, not because of the pain, because someone had stayed. The next 2 weeks blurred into a routine of medication, physical therapy attempts, nurses checking vitals, and my grandfather adjusting pillows, bringing water, reading newspapers out loud, complaining about the food, and threatening to file complaints about those damn chairs that were not designed for any human spine. He took sponge baths in the bathroom sink. He ate vending machine sandwiches until the nurses took pity on him and started sneaking cafeteria meals into the room. One nurse even brought him a pillow and a blanket. My mother never came. Not once, not a call, not a text, nothing, not even a "how is he?" The nurses whispered about it constantly. That poor boy. How can a mother? If he were my son, and the head night doctor said the word none of us had dared to say out loud yet, abandonment. It lodged itself in my head like a splinter. On the 15th day, they finally discharged me. My grandfather helped me into the wheelchair, helped me into his old blue Chevrolet, buckled my seatbelt like I was 5 years old again. The car smelled like sawdust and mint gum. home, or so I thought. But when he turned the ignition on, he didn't take the route back to the house where my mother and Fernanda lived. He took a left instead of a right. Grandpa, wrong way, I said quietly. No, Matteo, his voice cracked. We're going exactly where we need to go. He didn't look at me while he drove, but his jaw clenched and unclenched, and his hands kept tightening around the wheel. When he finally spoke, each word felt heavy. Your mother called yesterday. A cold feeling spread across my chest, worse than the broken ribs. She said you shouldn't come back, he continued. That Fernando doesn't want the responsibility. That with your injuries, you'll need too much care. That she has no time for that. I stared out the window. Not crying, just empty, she said. He added quietly, adjusting his grip on the wheel. That you live with me now. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. My grandfather reached over and squeezed my knee gently. You're safe with me, he said. You always have been. You always will be. We drove the rest of the way in silence to people who had lost something enormous and gained something even bigger without knowing it yet. What neither of us knew, what neither of us could have known, was that while we were driving toward our new life, a man in a grey suit was walking up to my mother's door, and her world was about to collapse in a way she never saw coming. The knock on my mother's door came exactly 15 days after the accident. She opened it expecting a delivery, a neighbor, anything ordinary. Instead, a man in a grey suit and polished shoes stood there holding a leather briefcase and a manila envelope. He didn't smile. He didn't soften his voice. He went straight to the point. Mrs. Patricia Vega, he said. You are being formally notified of a legal action. My mother froze. Fernando took one step back, already calculating how far he could distance himself from whatever this was. The man opened the envelope without ceremony. The Central Hospital has filed a suit against you for abandonment of a minor in a medical emergency. She laughed. That brittle, defensive laugh she used when reality threatened her image. That's absurd. Who would dare? The lawyer continued, cutting her off cleanly. According to the hospital's recorded call, when asked to authorize emergency surgery for your minor son, you stated, let me know if he doesn't survive. I don't have time for paperwork. The color drained from her face. These statements were witnessed by 3 members of the medical staff. Hospital protocol requires reporting immediate neglect to the state. A separate investigation for gross parental negligence has been initiated. He placed the packet of documents into her hands with deliberate precision. You will find the summons for the preliminary hearing inside. She tried to argue. The lawyer didn't give her space. Additionally, he continued, Mr. Ricardo Mendoza has filed for full guardianship and submitted supporting documentation spanning several years. The court has deemed his petition valid. Fernanda moved another step away from her dart. It wasn't subtle. My mother tried to speak, but the words dissolved into panic. This is a misunderstanding. My father-in-law, he's manipulating. He wants to take Matteo from me. No, the lawyer said sharply. You did that yourself. It was the only emotional sentence he allowed himself. He closed his briefcase. Higher counsel, do not ignore the hearing. Good evening. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, with the truth stacked neatly in a manila envelope. That was the exact moment her version of control cracked. She would spend the next months trying to salvage an image that had already collapsed. But that night, the night she learned she would face a judge, was the exact point where the balance of power shifted permanently while she was falling apart. I was sitting in my grandfather's kitchen drinking water through a straw, unaware that the law had already moved on my behalf. The consequences she thought would never touch her were already in motion. I didn't learn what had happened at my mother's house until a week later. Why then? I'd settled into my grandfather's rhythm. Slow mornings with fresh coffee, the smell of old wood, soft classical music playing from the radio he refused to replace because they don't make them like this anymore. He served me breakfast toast, eggs, fruit, and sat across from me with a seriousness that made my stomach tighten. Matteo, he said, there are things you need to know. He told me everything. The lawsuit, the hospital report, the recorded phone call, the state investigation, the manila envelope, and then he told me the part he'd been holding back. I filed for custody. Matteo, he said, voice steady but eyes soft. Not because I want to take anything from you. Because I want to protect you. I just stared at him. I didn't even know how to breathe for a second. I wasn't going to let her do this again. He said quietly. Not to you. Not after what she did to your father. I blinked hard. What do you mean? I asked. She didn't do anything to Dad. For the first time, my grandfather hesitated. He rubbed his forehead, choosing each word with surgical precision. Your father died of cancer, he said. But your mother, she didn't handle it well. She stopped going to treatments with him after the second month. She said hospitals made her anxious. She missed his last appointment, the one where the doctor said there was nothing left to do. I felt something inside me twist. She wasn't there when he died, he whispered. I was. She arrived 3 hours later. After getting her hair done, he didn't look at me then. He looked at the table, as if the past itself embarrassed him. Your father begged me, he said, voice breaking for the first time since the accident. He begged me to look after you. He swallowed hard. I promised him. We sat in silence, the kind that fills an entire house. Then he continued, and over the years, he said, I kept notes. Every time she said she didn't have money for your school supplies, but bought designer shoes the next day. Every time she left you with me because she wanted a weekend trip with Fernando. Every time you called crying because she forgot your birthday or didn't show up to a school event. I felt heat behind my eyes. Shame, sadness, gratitude all tangled. I never wanted to use that documentation, he said. I prayed I never would. But when I heard her say those words on the hospital recording, he closed his eyes, exhaled long and slow. Let me know if he doesn't survive, he repeated, voice shaking. That was the moment I understood she wasn't careless. She wasn't overwhelmed. She had made a choice. I covered my face with my hands. My breath hitched. He placed a hand on my back. Matteo, he said, you didn't cause this. You didn't deserve this. Her actions, they're hers alone. I nodded, even though nothing felt real. Finally, I asked, what happens now? He didn't sugarcoat it. There will be hearings, evaluations, social workers, judges. Your mother will be questioned. And so will you. I swallowed. Will she lose her rights? He paused a long moment. With what she did, he said finally, looking me directly in the eyes. It's very likely. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel revenge. I felt something else entirely, the quiet, painful confirmation that the person who was supposed to love me first had chosen me last, and the person who was supposed to be just a grandfather had stepped up to be everything else. The shift in my family wasn't emotional anymore. It was legal, permanent, inevitable, and it was only the beginning. The weeks after my grandfather's revelation felt unreal, like living in a house built from pieces of two different worlds. One world was calm, the smell of fresh coffee every morning, my grandfather's steady footsteps shuffling through the hallway, the sound of newspapers rustling as he sat by my bedside reading headlines I was too medicated to process. The other world was a storm. Lawyers, hearings, evaluations, social workers, and a legal process moving with a force I couldn't stop even if I'd wanted to. My mother called my new phone 3 times the first week. 3 voicemails I never listened to. On the 4th day, she tried calling my grandfather. He didn't answer either. The 5th day, she tried messaging me on social media. My grandfather saw the notification. He turned off the phone and placed it on the nightstand. You don't need that right now, he said simply. And he was right, because I was falling apart quietly, not in the dramatic screaming way. In the way where you wake up suddenly at a.m. thinking you're still on the asphalt. In the way where you flinch every time a phone rings because part of your brain expects someone to say, you're on your own again. In the way where you stare at the ceiling and ask yourself how your own mother looked at a ringing hospital phone and chose dinner. Therapy began the 2nd week. My grandfather insisted, Dr. Ramrez didn't look like a therapist at all. She looked like a tired aunt who'd seen everything and had no patience for nonsense. She didn't ask soft, how does that make you feel questions. She asked things like, why do you think you still want her to love you? Why are you taking responsibility for her choices? What would you tell a friend if this happened to him? Every answer cracked open another door in my mind. Every session left me exhausted in a way surgery never had. Meanwhile, the legal world moved forward without waiting for my feelings to adjust. The first hearing came. I was not present physically, but my statement was, my grandfather, though he was there, he wore the same suit he'd worn to my father's funeral. He shaved carefully that morning. He practiced what he would say. When he returned home afterward, I could tell from his expression that things had gone exactly how he expected. Your mother showed up, he said as he hung his coat. Was she angry? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No, he said. Worse, she was performing. He sat down heavily at the table. She cried on cue. Blamed stress. Blamed confusion. Blamed the doctors for scaring her. Blamed Fernando for not supporting her. She blamed everything except her own voice on that recording. I looked away, and the judge. I asked. My grandfather let out a quiet breath. She listened, he said, and she didn't look sympathetic. Not at all. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. This isn't about punishment, he said gently. This is about safety. Safety, a strange, fragile word. A word that felt like something I had never fully experienced until I moved back with him. Part of me felt guilty about the process. Another part felt relieved, but the part that surprised me the most, the part I barely admitted even in therapy, was the small flicker of anger that refused to die. How could she do that to me? How could anyone do that to their own child? The paperwork grew. The hearings continued. The evidence piled up, and my mother, she wasn't fighting for custody. Not really. She was fighting for her reputation. That was the detail that pushed everything over the edge for me, because I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing face while she struggled to protect her image. My grandfather was cooking meals I liked, adjusting the blankets around my casted leg, making sure I took my meds, waiting outside therapy with a crossword puzzle. The contrast was so sharp it made my chest ache. One of them had chosen me. One of them never had. And for the first time in my life, I was starting to accept which one was actually my family. The preliminary hearing came and went, and the second one, the one that really mattered, was a turning point I didn't witness in person, but felt in the air the moment my grandfather walked back into the house. It was in his posture. In the way he closed the door. In the way he exhaled, long and heavy, like someone who had set down a weight he'd been carrying for years. What happened? I asked quietly from the couch. He sat next to me, not across from me, close. The hospital presented their recording, he said. My stomach tightened. He didn't repeat it. He didn't need to. I had heard it once in the trauma bay. Once was enough for a lifetime. He continued. They played your mother's exact words in the courtroom. Everyone heard them. I nodded slowly, gripping the armrest. And I asked. He wiped his palms on his pants, something he did only when he was overwhelmed. The judge stopped the audio halfway through. He said, because she didn't need to hear the rest. He paused. She said she'd been on the bench for 30 years and had never encountered such clear, deliberate negligence. I felt something inside me twist, equal parts vindication and grief. Did MOM say anything? My grandfather gave a humorless laugh. She cried. She blamed the hospital for misinterpreting her tone. She accused the nurses of making her sound cold. She claimed she was overwhelmed, confused, pressured. He looked at me, his eyes sad. She never once said, I was wrong. We sat there in silence for a moment, both letting that sink in. Then he continued. The judge issued a temporary suspension of her parental rights effective immediately. Social services recommended a full psychological evaluation. And he hesitated. And the hospital is pressing criminal charges. Gross negligence resulting in endangerment of a minor. I breathed out slowly. I wasn't happy. I wasn't excited. I wasn't celebrating. I felt tired. Tired in a way that didn't come from broken bones or surgeries or physical rehab. It came from 17 years of wanting a mother who never existed. A week later, things escalated in a way none of us expected. It started with a phone call my grandfather didn't answer, then a message, then another. Finally, the truth came through my aunt, my father's sister, who still spoke to my mother occasionally. She called my grandfather late at night, voice tight and uneasy. Ricardo, she said. Fernando left her. My grandfather didn't react. He packed his things and left. She continued. Said he wanted no part in this. Said he never agreed to legal trouble. Still, my grandfather remained silent. And she was fired, my aunt added, lowering her voice. Her company found out about the charges. They didn't want the bad PR, my grandfather finally sighed. I see, he said. My aunt hesitated. She's alone, she said softly. She has no one. My grandfather looked at me just a brief glance, and his voice was steady. She chose that path, he said. We didn't choose it for her. When he hung up, I didn't say anything. He didn't either. There was nothing left to say. What broke me wasn't that she lost her job, or that Fernando left, or that she was alone. It was that part of me, some old, wounded part, still wanted to take the pain away from her, still wanted to believe she would learn something from the consequences, still wanted to believe mother meant something. But every time that thought came up, I remembered her voice on the phone. Let me know if he doesn't survive. And the part of me that wanted to save her went quiet. Fast forward to weeks. The final hearing date was set. My grandfather got full emergency guardianship. My mother's parental rights were suspended indefinitely. My surname was legally added to my grandfather's name, Mendoza, twice. Just like my father, the judge said something that stayed with me. Biology makes a parent. Actions make a guardian. The legal world had finally caught up to what my heart had known for years. My mother wasn't losing custody of me. She had given it up long before the accident. The law was simply acknowledging the truth. The final hearing happened 3 months later. My grandfather wore his best suit, the one he saved for weddings, graduations, and moments that mattered. He stood in front of the judge with a calm dignity that made the entire courtroom look small around him. My mother didn't look like my mother anymore. She looked wrung out, hollow, aged, dark circles under her eyes, hair messy, hands shaking, expensive clothes swapped for something plain and worn. She sat across from the judge and delivered a monologue of apologies that sounded rehearsed and completely empty. I wasn't myself. I was under stress. I was manipulated. I've been in therapy. I love my son. I didn't know it was so serious. I panicked. I never meant to hurt anyone. I'm changing. I want to make things right. It was all emotion. Zero accountability. The judge didn't look moved. Not even for a breath. Then they played the recording again. Her voice filled the room. Let me know if he doesn't survive. I don't have time for paperwork. The silence afterward was suffocating. My mother sobbed loudly, as if crying hard enough could erase the sentence. The judge didn't react. Then the hospital's representative stood up with a stack of documentation in addition to the recorded call. He said, "We have policy logs showing that Mrs. Vega ignored 4 follow-up calls from the hospital regarding her son's critical condition during the 15 days of his hospitalization." He flipped a page. Additionally, she was notified when the patient woke from sedation. She did not respond. He flipped another page. Mrs. Vega made no visits, no inquiries, and no financial contributions during the patient's extended stay. My mother sputtered something about being emotionally overwhelmed, but the judge lifted one hand to silence her. Mrs. Vega, the judge said, you had 15 days to demonstrate concern. Your choices during those 15 days speak louder than anything you are saying now. And my grandfather spoke. He didn't cry. He didn't point fingers. He didn't call her names. He simply said, I promised my son, before he died, that I would protect Matteo. I will honor that promise until my last breath. The courtroom went still. He placed a binder on the table. I've documented every instance in which I had to step in for Matteo because his mother chose not to, he said. Not as ammunition, but as a record of responsibility. The judge looked through it. Pictures, receipts, school reports, notes, dates, all the moments my grandfather had been the one to show up after reviewing everything. The judge closed the folder, removed her glasses, and delivered the verdict. Effective immediately, she said. Patricia Vega's parental rights are terminated. My mother's sobbing turned from theatrical to animalistic. Full legal custody is awarded to Mr. Ricardo Mendoza. My grandfather bowed his head just slightly as if receiving something sacred. Then the judge added the line that changed everything. Additionally, Upon the minor's 18th birthday, he may petition for formal adoption, and based on his wishes, this court will support it. My grandfather told me later that he needed a moment to breathe, because he hadn't expected that part. My mother tried to stand, tried to argue, tried to reach for some version of control that no longer existed, but the bailiff stopped her. The judge left the room. The decision was final. That was the last day the law saw her as my parent. But here's the strange part. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel victorious. It didn't feel like payback. It felt like something far quieter. Closure, not the kind that tears everything with a bow, the kind that builds a doorway. There wasn't one before. A few months later, I turned 18. I signed the papers myself. I became Ricardo Mendoza's son officially, legally, completely. And my mother, her world kept shrinking. She lost her job. Fernando left. Her friends distanced themselves. Her reputation collapsed. She moved cities. She stopped contacting me. She didn't lose me. She lost access. There's a difference. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply walked out of that courtroom and into the parking lot where my grandfather stood leaning against his old blue Chevy, hands in his pockets, squinting at the sun like the world finally made sense again. Ready to go home, Matteo? He asked, and for the first time in my life, I didn't question what home meant. I just nodded. Part 8. This is the final part. I met my mother only once after everything ended. I didn't see her for 2.5 years. No calls, no messages, no birthday texts, nothing. My grandfather never mentioned her unless I brought her up. Therapy helped me rebuild myself piece by piece, and by the time I turned 20, I was finally stable enough to look at the past without shaking. Then one night, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed with a message. Request.it was her. A long paragraph, full of apologies, full of explanations, full of excuses disguised as insight. I've changed. I was in a dark place. I didn't know how to be a mother. I want to make things right. I need your forgiveness so I can move on. Not I'm sorry. Not I failed you. Not I abandoned you. And definitely not how are you. I showed it to my grandfather. It's your choice, Matteo, he said. Whatever you decide, I'm here. I thought for a week, then. I agreed to meet her once, a public place, neutral ground. My grandfather waited in the car. She walked into the CAF late, 15 minutes late, still. The same pattern. She looked older. Not in a natural way, in a life finally caught up to me way. Her clothes were worn, her eyes exhausted. She sat down, hands trembling, rehearsed lines shaking on her lips. Matteo, thank you for coming. You don't know how much this means to me. I've been dying inside. I was manipulated. I was depressed. I was. You have 5 minutes, I said. Go ahead. She blinked. That threw her off, but she kept talking. She apologized. She explained. She cried. She blamed Fernando. She blamed stress. She blamed trauma. She blamed the hospital for misunderstanding her tone. Never once did she say, I chose not to show up. I left you there. I put you second. I hurt you. I was wrong. When she finished, she reached for my hand across the table. I pulled mine back. Are you done? I asked. She nodded, hopeful. Okay, I said. Listen to me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't stutter. I didn't shrink. I didn't fear her reaction. I spoke clearly. I don't hate you. Hate would require energy I'm not giving you. But I don't forgive you either. And you are not my family. Her lips trembled. Matteo, please, you had 17 years to try. I continued. You chose not to. You chose Fernando. You chose everything else. And when I almost died, you chose dinner. She started sobbing again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't snap. I didn't insult her. I just told the truth. My grandfather gave me what you never did. Stability. Safety. Love. He showed up when you didn't. He didn't choose me because he had to. He chose me because he wanted to. I stood. My life is good now. I'm healing. I'm studying. I'm working. I have a future. And none of it includes you. She reached toward me, desperate. Matteo, please, we can fix this. No, I said, stepping back. We can't. I set enough cash on the table to pay for my coffee and walked out. My grandfather saw me coming and didn't ask a single question. He just started the car. Home? He asked. Home, I said. He smiled. That soft, warm smile that had saved my life more than once. We drove away. That was the last time I saw her. Now I'm 22. My grandfather is 78 and still wakes up early. Still shuffles around the kitchen in slippers. Still tells me stories about my dad while stirring his coffee. I finished my degree. Got a job in consulting. I still live with him not because I can't afford to move out, but because I want to make every year count. He chose me. I choose him back. My mother moved cities. She rebuilt her life, apparently. I hope she finds peace genuinely, but she is not part of mine. What I learned is simple. Family is not blood. Family is who stays, who shows up, who fights for you, who chooses you even when it's difficult. My mother chose herself. My grandfather chose me, and in the end, that made all the difference.